member at BU School of Social Work and a member of the CTSI Community Engagement Team. My research uses participatory methods to engage youth and families in decision-making in multiple systems, such as healthcare, education, and child welfare. I've really benefited from attending the speaker series as an audience member over the past 2 years, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to facilitate the speaker series this year. For those of you who are new to this space, the speaker series is a monthly seminar held on the third Thursday of every month with the goal of sharing best practices in community engagement and building the capacity both within the BU community and our community partners. I want to acknowledge my colleague and friend, Dr. Linda Sprague-Martinez, a faculty member at the School of Social Work and co-director of the CTSI Community Engagement Corps, for her role in developing, facilitating, and growing the speaker series over the past few years. Linda, if you're here, thank you very much. The title of our session tonight is Community Engagement Across Campus, Resources to Advance Health Equity. And our learning objectives for this evening are to, and Yorma, you can advance the slide, are to learn about a conceptual model of community engagement as it relates to health equity, to understand the importance of community engagement across campuses and share resources to continue building a culture of community engagement. We're really fortunate to have an amazing panel comprised of BU BMC colleagues representing leadership, faculty, and students. Our colleagues will share their perspectives on why community engagement is important in their own work and provide us with some examples. We'll also have an opportunity to collectively share resources that have been helpful in building capacity for community engagement in your work. The resources will be compiled throughout the session and shared with each of you in a follow-up email after the session. So before we begin the panel discussion, I would like to introduce Dr. Tracy Battaglia, the co-director of the BU CTSI Community Engagement, who will provide us with an introduction to the CTSI, a conceptual model of community engagement that's going to guide our panel discussion. And Tracy, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Estrella. Good evening, everyone. And it's just a true delight to see so many people from so many different programs and disciplines. And so we're thrilled to have you. And we're super thrilled that Estrella is going to be guiding us through this seminar series throughout the year. So thank you, Estrella, for leading us in that regard. I think we want to acknowledge that this is a speaker series that is supported by our funding agency, the National Center to Advance Translational Science. And so our community engagement program, which hosts this speaker series, I'm going to ask whoever's not muted to try to mute so we don't get any feedback, please.
She's jumping with Steve, and Steve was trying to figure out if he needs to measure. What analyst support analyst clinical care?
So the Clinical Translational Science Institutes are funded through NCATS with the explicit goal of supporting translational science. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the definition of translational science, it is the anchor at which we approach our community engagement group, our community engagement program.
It's so it's not a lot.
Thank you, Anna. Translational science aims to accelerate the process of turning biomedical research discoveries into real-world applications that improve people's health, such as diagnostics, treatments, and cures. So basically, it is the study of overcoming barriers to translating scientific discoveries out into the community. And our goal as a community engagement program is to provide some infrastructure to support investigators and community members to come together to maximize the impact of discovery and speed translation. Next slide. So the specific goals of our community engagement program at Boston University is depicted in that little figure, that we recognize that in order to sort of advance translational research, we need to develop and sustain existing community academic partnerships. We have to expand the capacity for each of us, whatever stakeholder we are as a researcher or a community member, to have competency in community engagement skills. And then we need to disseminate those best practices. And so we hope that this seminar series is a place for us to come together to do that collectively. Next slide. Many of you may be familiar with this conceptual model. If you are, excellent. If you aren't, we welcome you to become familiar with it, because we're very fortunate that the National Academies and some of our colleagues across the CTSAs nationally have contributed to this conceptual framework to help us understand how we utilize community engagement at the core of our work in pursuit of health equity. So at the heart of this conceptual model are the core principles of community engagement, and that if we enact them and we are successful in building relationships with stakeholders where there's trust and bidirectional benefit and inclusiveness and all of those things in the center there, then we're going to propel all of these 4 areas forward in pursuit of health equity. We're going to strengthen partnerships and alliances. We're going to expand our knowledge. We're going to improve the health and healthcare programs and policies in our health systems. And we're going to help communities thrive. And all together, these are going to work in pursuit of health equity. So by centering the core principles of CE, we're going to drive health equity and transform our health systems. And so we'll come back to this conceptual model as we go through this program together throughout the year. Next slide. So I just want to introduce you to our amazing team, many of whom are on the call with us today. We couldn't do this work without all of the collective expertise of the team members. We're small but mighty. I have the honor of co-directing with my colleague, Linda Sprague-Martinez. Rebecca Lobb is our Director of Integration and Strategic Management. It's a new role that our CTSA has in recognition of the importance of community engagement across all aspects of our CTSA. Estrella is a new member of our group who is taking on responsibility for this speaker series, but also for our partnership grants and learning collaborative. Deb Chassler is here with us. She's a senior academic researcher who helps us with some of our community-facing trainings and education. Yorma is with us today as our program manager. And we have another new member, Kareem Kim. Welcome, Kareem, a longtime member of our community advisory board who is now a new research program manager on our team. Next slide. We have a number of services through our program. And so if you just click through Yorma in the interest of time. We have many structural supports, including a community advisory board. We have a collaborative with Boston Health Net and our community health centers to develop a practice-based research network. We, of course, provide consultation services for community members, community stakeholders, or researchers who are interested in getting support around community engaged science. We support research through different partnership grants and pilot grants. We have a number of training and education programs, including this Building a Culture of Community seminar series. And then we participate as much as we can in networking and supporting our partners out in the community. And so hopefully throughout the course of this evening, we'll be able to touch on some of these programs a little bit more. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Estrella. Thanks, Estrella.
I'm muted. Thank you, Tracy. It was really helpful to hear this overview of all of the opportunities and resources available through the CTSI. Gloria Waters is unable to join us this evening, and so I think she has prepared a brief video for us. Yorma, can you play that video?
Somebody just give me a quick thumbs up that you get sound as well.
Good afternoon. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Gloria Waters, Vice President and Associate Provost for Research here at Boston University. In this role, I oversee the operational aspects of research, sponsored programs, compliance, tech transfer, and those sorts of areas. But more importantly, I oversee all of our university-wide research centers. And these centers are those whose goals are to really help solve some of the most important and pressing issues of our day through interdisciplinary research. I want to thank Dr. Tracy Battaglia for her role in the BU CTSI and Community Engagement Program, and also Dr. Augustberger for facilitating the 23-24 speaker series. I'm sorry that I'm not able to be there today to partake in this kickoff panel. I'm delighted that community engagement is a pillar of the CTSI. There is no question that translational research can't be successful in a vacuum. It really depends upon the insights of individuals who experience health inequities, as well as organizations and systems that support them. As outlined in the NIH report on this topic, researchers really need to work together with private citizens, community leaders, and health professionals to make changes that result in long-lasting, healthy environments. Of all the academic institutions in Boston, I think that Boston University has the longest standing and deepest commitment to the community. One of the points that President Brown made early in his time at Boston University is that BU is really Boston's university. We're embedded in the city of Boston in a way that no other university is, and it's critical that the university be in service of the city. This is abundantly clear on the medical campus with the deep connections to BMC, but also throughout the university with many connections to the city of Boston, whether it be through our scholarship program for City of Boston employees, the Menino Scholars Program offering full tuition to City of Boston high school students, or other programs such as that. A commitment to community engagement continues to be a really integral part of the university's 2030 strategic plan. And not only is there a commitment to the City of Boston, but to all of the constituencies that we serve. Whether it be particular patient groups, such as the Aphasia Community Resource Center at Sargent College, which provides support for those with language problems after stroke, school systems such as Wheelock's deep engagement with the Boston Public Schools, or the community engaged research in the School of Public Health, which is designed to build resilience against extreme heat and environmental justice. I'm really delighted that this panel has been organized and that this is an important topic that the CTSI is engaging in. And I think that this will be a really interesting panel today. I'm sorry that I'm not able to be there. Thank you.
Thank you to Gloria Waters. I think it's really helpful to hear the commitment of Boston University to community engagement, and also for highlighting some of the examples across the university between BU, BMC, Boston, and our surrounding communities. So now I'd like to briefly introduce you to our wonderful panel of BU BMC community members. We've already heard from Dr. Tracy Battaglia, the co-director of the CTSI Community Engagement Corps. Tracy will be joining our panel discussion. We also have Petrina Martin-Cherry, who is the Vice President of Community Engagement and External Affairs at Boston Medical Center. Welcome, Trina. We have Dr. Margaret Lombe, Associate Professor at Boston University School of Social Work and Chair of the Macro Department. Welcome, Margaret. And we have Madison Kitchen, an advanced standing MSW student at BU School of Social Work. Welcome, Madison. So I'd like to first invite the panelists to discuss their current role and why community engagement is an important part of this role. To ensure that we have an opportunity to hear from everyone, I'm going to ask the panelists to speak for about 2 to 3 minutes. And we're going to start, Trina is going to start with a video that discusses some of the initiatives at BMC in community engagement and economic mobility.
What
When we think about really focusing on health equity, we have to look at the upstream drivers of some of the clinical outcomes that we see in our hospital. Boston Medical Center is a hospital that serves communities that have been affected by redlining and have been disinvested in when it comes to housing, workforce development, and education. All of those things affect clinical outcomes. Oftentimes people ask us, why is it so important for a hospital to really be engaged in economic mobility? Economic mobility is a true social determinant of health.
Economic mobility is a powerful engine for an individual to be able to thrive in our society. BOSS Collaborative is a community-driven initiative birthed out of Boston Medical Center, and one of our primary goals is opening pathways to employment and professional advancement for our community members.
We know that if we can provide on-ramps and opportunities, make sure that there is workforce development where there's training so they have access to jobs in biotech, in healthcare, in blue-green jobs, the long term is seeing a transformational change. An example of how we're trying to do this in our own workforce is by providing upskill training and access to leadership opportunities. Monica Germain is a great example of how this approach is having a lasting impact.
I am first generation, I speak Haitian Creole, and I knew that right out of nursing school, I wanted to work in a place that I'd be comfortable. I also wanted to work in a place that had patients as well as colleagues that looked just like me. I started here on like a med-surg floor and then transitioned to the ICU, which was amazing. You know, I was able to gain all these clinical skills, but I felt like I was still missing a piece. I was still searching for more, if that makes sense. There was a chance to apply for a health equity fellowship, and I applied and got accepted to the program. So right now I'm in this fellowship and working differently with patients. I feel that now I look through things with an equity lens. I'm able to be in spaces with leaders and have conversations about structural and institutional racism and how that affects our patients.
Another area we're focusing on is neighborhood revitalization, particularly investing in Black and Brown-owned businesses. Nubian Markets, which is located right in the heart of Roxbury, is one of those businesses.
Nubian Market is basically a celebration of the African diaspora through food. It's a place where people come, gather, shop, and celebrate, our culture. It's been a sense of pride for the community because they can see themselves in us. They love the experience of having a dignified shopping experience. And of course, the products and services we give here are unique.
We not only created a pathway to ownership for the founders of Nubian Markets, we also connected them to additional funders, guided their communications and engagement strategies, and advised them on how to hire locally.
Almost half of our staff comes immediately from this vicinity, and they live and work here. The relationship that we have with Boston Medical Center and BOSS Collaborative is one that we cherish very highly.
We're thinking about community and our residents from a long-term sustainability approach. We are moving beyond the status quo and doing the work to create a community that we can be proud of and our patients can thrive in now, as well as 20 to 30 years down the line.
We're moving beyond just the clinical. Of course, we're a hospital and we're treating diabetes and cancer and all of those things, but we're also looking at patients in a 360-degree model, making sure that we understand what they need.
Our future plan for Nubian Markets is to abolish food deserts, whether in our city or in the nation. We want to make sure that other communities have the same opportunity for fresh food.
We are creating a seat at the table where no seat has existed before. We are giving a voice to people who are deserving. There is no greater reward than working at an institution that is committed to that on a daily basis.
Wow. Trina, thank you so much for sharing that video with us. That was fantastic. And thank you so much for all of your work at BMC around community engagement. I know of a lot of the initiatives that you have spearheaded, and I really appreciate that you are giving a voice and a seat at the table to communities. So thank you for sharing that with us. And we're looking forward to hearing more examples from you as we move forward with the panel.
Absolutely. I put the link to the video in the chat, so thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. So Tracy, you've talked with us a little bit about your role with the CTSI, but we'd also love to hear a little bit more about your work at the hospital and sort of why community engagement is so important in that work.
Thanks, Estrella. Yeah, so I'm sorry I didn't do a good job of introducing myself when I did my presentation, but so I'm a primary care physician by training, health services researcher, and I came after I graduated Boston University Medical School. I came back to Boston Medical Center to do fellowship training in women's health. And that was driven largely by my interest in care delivery based on a personal experience with my own health, where I recognized I had a lot of privilege in my care that I didn't necessarily see in the patients that I was caring for. And so I essentially built my career around, trying to understand and address care delivery inequities for the patients that we're serving at Boston Medical Center. And very early in my career, I recognized that in order to be successful, I needed to partner with other people who could help me address these really complex issues. And those people were people, representatives of the patients that we were serving and the communities and the community organizations that were out there representing the communities. And so I've been doing this kind of work for many years before community engagement was a term that anybody talked about. And I can tell you that people used to come to me and say, Tracy, why are you doing this work? Why are you going to these meetings? Why are you convening these groups? And I'm happy to say that doing that work was not only fulfilling for me as sort of, personally and professionally, but it allowed me to sort of do some really sort of impactful work in the cancer care delivery realm. And in the process of doing that work, the CTSA sort of recognized the importance of community engagement. And I had the opportunity to sort of lead the development of infrastructure for other people like everyone on this call to come together to learn how to do this collectively. And so what warms my heart about this evening is that the diversity of the people and the backgrounds and the experiences of the people that are here. And so this speaker series, I think, is just a space for us to come together to learn from one another about how to approach this, because we're really learning together. And it's a constant and forever sort of learning experience. And so that's what brought me to sort of this space. And it's really the spirit at which this speaker series was born as well.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm going to turn it to Margaret Lombe to talk a little bit about your role as a faculty member within the School of Social Work and the chair of the macro practice department, and sort of why community engagement is important to you in that role.
Thank you, Estrella, for your kind introduction. So my primary role is really divided in three portions. One is that I'm an educator, and the second is that I'm a researcher, and my research spans the local and international context. I'm also a mentor, and I really go to why community engagement is important for me. Like, thinking about this question, I realized I look at community engagement as the only way I can do my research effectively, because community engagement takes me to communities that I care about. And these communities are often marginalized. And these are communities that have been over-researched. And they have very little participation or engagement in the research endeavor. And in the past few years, there's been growing attention, like we heard from my colleague refer to the attention on community engagement. And this has been seen in terms of looking at communities not necessarily as the center of social problems that researchers address, but also the locus of resilience and solutions to the social problems. And furthermore, with time, I've learned that communities have the capacity to problem solve if they are meaningfully engaged. And indeed, I have gained the understanding that Communities understand their context better than I do as a researcher. They also understand the problems that they experience in ways that I, as a researcher, does not understand. And I've also gained realization that results of my research are likely to have high utility and create sustainable impact if communities that I work with are engaged in my research.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
I just sort of want to highlight the themes that you've been talking about in terms of really going to the community and understanding the priorities of the community and sort of building, partnerships and identifying the research that communities are interested in. And you also mentioned the sustainability, which I think is often challenging within research context. And so building those relationships and sustaining those relationships is really critical in terms of, as you said, addressing some of these social problems. So thank you for sharing that. And there was a lot of overlap in terms of Trina's video and what Tracy was talking about in terms of sort of really understanding the community priorities and addressing them. So, so Madison, I'd like to turn it over to you to talk about sort of as a student, what drew you to the community, to getting involved in the course and then community engagement.
Yeah, thank you so much, Estrella. So my background originally is in musical theater. I studied musical theater as an undergraduate, and was exposed to some community-based and community-engaging work through the Theater of the Oppressed framework by Auguste Boal, which is based on Freire's framework. But then coming into the dual degree in special education and social work at BU and becoming interested in research and eventually hoping to pursue a PhD, I didn't have formal research experience. And getting research experience became very challenging because they wanted me to have research experience already. And I was like, that's why I'm trying to get research experience so that I can do research. And so when Linda Sprague-Martinez had a class last semester called Community-Based Participatory Research, I was like, I'll take anything with research in the title. And we had the opportunity through Linda to partner with the Boston Housing Authority to conduct a survey about a $1,500 one-time cash payment they received and how it impacted their community, their lives, so that they could have evidence to potentially pitch and get the funding to have the program again. And that class was foundational, and I'm so glad I had the opportunity to take it, was foundational for me as a future researcher, because it was a masterclass in the fact that communities are the experts of their own needs and their own experiences, and centering them and asking them what they need and how it helped them was hugely impactful for me as a researcher. So even as I go into more quantitative focused work or work that might be rooted in a little bit more of data rather than community, going into those communities is something that's now a huge priority for me because I had the opportunity to take that class at BU.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And I also just want to highlight for the students who are here that that is a course that was Linda Sprague-Martinez, the co-director of the CTSI, developed with the intention of really sort of building capacity for students in terms of community engaged research. So I'm glad that you had that positive experience and sort of that you can now build on that in thinking about future work. Trina, I'd like to turn it back to you. I know that, the video was really helpful for us in terms of framing your work at BMC, but we would love to hear some more examples of some of the initiatives and sort of best practices that you have seen within your work at BMC.
Thank you, Estrella. Everything that we're doing at BMC as a system is really focused on the feedback that we're getting from the community. For those of you who are not as familiar with Boston Medical Center, during COVID, we were very, very intentional about race, and we were very, very intentional about zip code in our outreach to our vaccine distribution. We were able to get larger amounts of quantities and we knew exactly where folks in the communities we serve were sickest and dying. BMC at the time was the COVID hospital. And so based on the data of where folks lived who were suffering the most is where we put vaccination clinics. So 6 sites in churches and community centers, YMCAs. And so we spent about a year administering vaccines out of these community-based sites, but also spent a tremendous amount of time focused on community conversations. They were, in purpose to engage communities, to educate them about the vaccine in their own language with clinicians who looked like them and spoke their language. So we learned a lot. We knew that everything that we learned from COVID was applicable to research, to diabetes care, to mental health and wellness. And so we've used those same guiding principles in how we're engaging with communities. So we spend a lot of time being in communities, providing access to care in communities, and we spend a lot of time listening. And I'm fortunate enough to work with Tracy and this team in some of the community engagement. And what we know is that, before we go into communities for any research purposes, for community-based participatory research purposes, we're going in first to educate the community so that they understand what this research is. And so when they are given an opportunity to choose on whether they're going to participate or not, they can participate from a point of knowledge. Somebody said before, one of my colleagues, you said that you can't beat the community in knowing what's best for the community. They know what their needs are. They know what their desires are. And so if you ask them, they'll tell you. And so I think, BMC and BU as a system, we've learned how to do that very well, to partner with our community. I think one of the things that is really, really important is that, as we think about community-based participatory research, what are we leaving behind? Like, are we making it, are we yes, educating them, but are we helping them set up, if it's a science-based project, are we helping them set up mechanisms where they can engage in STEM research or STEM education for their kids? Are we re-engaging them in community-based events? I see some members from the Boston SEAL teams where, yes, there's research in place, but there's also engagement. So we talk a lot about, well, how do we get the community to trust us? And so, yes, we use trusted community voices, but you yourself can become a trusted community voice if the community is used to seeing you on a consistent basis. So are you volunteering? Are you showing up? Are you going in with resources and volunteer efforts before you go in with a clipboard or a syringe? And I know that's, an extreme statement, but it's something that I hope that we all are thinking about when we are engaging communities.
Petrina, that is a absolutely critical statement. I teach the qualitative research methods course at BU, and students are always asking, well, how can I want to do research in these communities? And that's exactly the message, right? Is that, what are you providing to the community? You need to be in the community. You need to be developing the relationships. What are you giving back to the community? It's not about you and your research.
Absolutely. And I didn't give an example, and I'll do that quickly. One of the things that we are doing at BMC, or actually we're doing a lot of things. You saw that we're investing in Black-owned community-based businesses. But at BMC, we believe that wealth is health. And so when you look at all of the upstream drivers that cause these clinical outcomes, we know that if we could put money in the pockets of our community members, and we can help them, make better decisions for their families. So if you look at opportunities for education and workforce development in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, there are over 40,000 jobs available just in biotech. And so we're we're trying to figure out, like, how do we create pathways for those jobs? So at BMC, we are partnering with other institutions and other education organizations to see how we can provide training so that our community members can be trained and have access to these jobs that put money in their pockets, and it gives them a way out of whatever situation they're in. So pathways to home ownership, that's another thing that we're working at. So when we're thinking about research, we also have to think about the community itself, and then how we can greater meet their needs.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'm going to shift to Margaret, because I know that you spent a lot of time over the last year as part of the Learning Collaborative and as part of the partnership grant, building partnerships. And I'd love to hear some of your reflections on that.
Thank you. Like, if I'm to add anything to this conversation, it would be the capacity to take off my shoes. And this might mean a lot of things to different people, but for me, taking off my shoes means I signal to the community that I've arrived. I'm here for the long haul. I'm here to stay. I also signal permission for my community partners to take the lead. I'm saying to them indirectly, I'll defer to you as experts on issues that concern you and your children. And in a sense, I'm learning to make haste slowly. I'm not in a hurry. And this became apparent for my team, my research team and I, when we worked with a community partner in one of our CTSI funded grant, which was about community engagement. So, like, going into this collaboration, my team and I had clarity in terms of what we wanted to get out of the collaboration. We also had clarity with respect to how we wanted the collaboration to look like. But in the process, and this was mainly because we are committed to, we are funding from CTSI, and so we're committed to doing the research and the engagement as documented, which I know, like, when I'm doing community engaged research, there's a tendency to hurry and miss some steps. But in this case, we observed the process and we paid attention to the process. And we also learned to defer to our community partner. And we did this in the spirit of mutual respect. So at the end of the process, we found that the research that we had envisioned was not a question that we ended up with. And this was because we wanted to be responsive to the needs of our community partner, as well as to the local context in which our community partner is nested.
It's so powerful. And Madison, what about you in terms of your experience with the community? Does this resonate with you?
It really does. And one of the things I was thinking about while you were talking, Margaret, is the importance of easing into the community, but also supporting them for the transition if and when we leave our work with the community. How do we set them up to continue this work themselves? How do we leverage their expertise to have them translate that into their community so that they can become their own community leaders or researchers or change makers, even more so than they already are. So, not only are they the experts of their community, but how do we support them in leveraging that so that when we exit their space, that work still continues?
Estrella, if I could just sort of jump in here, because I feel like just everything Trina and Margaret and Madison are saying, I feel like, to me, having been sort of doing research for 25 years, is sort of it's a major culture shift. It's a culture shift from the way that we have historically approached research. And, it's Trina's sort of highlighted the intentionality, being really intentional about who we're targeting and how we're interacting with people. Margaret talked about shifting her research question, actually changing the question. Like, who does that? NIH would say, you can't change your question. Like, that's not science. And then, Madison talked about long-term commitment. and sustainability. And it's like that helicoptering in and helicoptering out. Like everything that you're all talking about is a paradigm shift from the traditional way that we do research, have done research. And I think it starts with intentionality, and it needs to continue with intentionality, because it's really easy for us to go back to those ways, because that's what we know and that's what's historically rewarded. And we can talk about that when we get to barriers.
I am going to I want to see, does anyone, so I know that, Trina, I know that you have another event. Unfortunately, Trina has another event, fortunately for her, but unfortunately for us, she has another event that she needs to attend this evening. Was there anything else that you wanted to share with the, share prior to logging off?
I'm very grateful to be a part of this conversation, and thank you all for being here. I know that you are in your own cities, you're doing amazing work, and thank you for just being committed to making sure that the community always has a seat at the table and they always feel like a partner in this work that we're doing. I think we always, we sometimes think, well, there's all these historical things that have happened that make community members not want to participate. I think, and that's true, but beyond that, the community is invested in making sure that their bodies, their DNA, their blood type, all of that is considered in new drugs, in the way that we are figuring out how to provide better health care for those communities. So I think as long as we are inclusive, as long as we continue to look at the community as partners and not just data, I think that we can go a long way in this work. So thank you for all of you for your commitment to the communities that we all serve. And thank you, Estrella and Tracy and everybody, for giving me an opportunity to talk to you tonight. And I hope you all are well, and take care. Bye.
Thank you, Trina.
Thank you, Trina.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Before she left, I was hoping that she would have sort of we could do as a follow-up the resources of how to get involved with the Health Equity Accelerator and the Community Engagement Program. And sort of one of the goals for this evening's conversation is to provide our participants with resources and opportunities to participate in the great things that are happening in all of these different programs. So we'll definitely follow up with folks, because I know that Trina and her CE group, they do outreach events. The Health Equity Accelerator has a equity forum that's virtual that people can participate in.
Yeah, so as part of the event, we're collecting resources, and we will have an opportunity towards the end for all of you to share any resources that have been helpful to you. And we will compile those resources and send them out in a follow-up email with the recording. So thank you for noting that, Tracy. And Trina did mention that she wanted us to share her information as well as the resources. So we will definitely have an opportunity to do that. So we have a few more minutes for the panel, and Tracy, you raised some really interesting points around sort of shifting the narrative in research, and sort of in thinking about shifting that narrative. And there's a lot of barriers to that. Like, as a faculty member at BU, I've experienced them myself, and I know that others, in conversations with others, there's like, the infrastructure isn't necessarily set up for community engagement. And so I'd like to turn to sort of maybe throw it back at you, Tracy, to talk about like what are some of the barriers? You're obviously overseeing the CTSI that faculty and staff and community partners have talked with you about, and sort of what are some of the strategies to address those barriers?
Yeah, I'll say a couple things. One is, we intentionally go back to that intentionality, statement, invited Trina Cherry Martin, VP for Community Engagement at Boston Medical Center, and Gloria Waters, our Provost for Research at Boston University, because we need leadership to invest and prioritize this kind of work. Because as I said, it's a paradigm shift from the usual way of doing things. And so if our leadership is not supporting this work and listening to where the barriers are to allow us to do this work, then we're not going to be successful in shifting the paradigm. So I think, our institutional policies and programs are not set up to incentivize us being present in the community, for example. So how do we incentivize students, faculty members, and staff to be in the community? We have to give them space intentionally as part of their role and responsibility. And there's some small examples of success there, but we still have a long way to go with that. So I can go on, but I would start with leadership and sort of incentivizing, you know, being community engagement. Like it should be part of your annual review. It should be part of your promotion package. It should be part of your grade and your course. Like if we incentivize it, it will happen.
Thank you. And I think a culture shift is happening at the university, and it's being spearheaded obviously by you and others in leadership. And but we have a ways to go. Margaret, do you want to?
Yeah, like I can't underscore enough what my colleague has just said. You know, like negotiating access to communities, it requires a lot of time. It requires that we take off our shoes, but if there's no incentive, how do you take off your shoes and signal, I'm here to stay? Yep. When there's, you know, like we're looking at the product, deliverables, and yet the community engagement itself should be seen as a deliverable because it takes time before we see the fruits. And another barrier is the question of mutuality and respect. And this has to do a lot with the fact that we're in a hurry to engage with communities because we are in a hurry to see the research completed and published from the research. And communities take notice and they don't fail to see our impatience. And they also see that we don't take them seriously. Like we are here to get something done, collaborate so we can get an end product. And so, yes, like my colleague said, a cultural shift is happening, but it needs to go further. And the leadership, the incentives are going to be critical for that cultural shift to take place effectively.
Yes, absolutely. We have a question. We have a question from the audience for Tracy. Would you share more detail on the types of investments in infrastructure at BU that you support in community engagement and research?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I put another link to our website so you could sort of look. I can give one example. And I alluded to this earlier, like my first research project was around follow-up to cancer screening among women, recognizing that there was these huge delays in sort of getting follow-up if you have a positive finding on your pap smear or your mammogram. And when we looked to try to understand it, we saw that the patients who were getting getting their primary care at community health centers were the patients who had the longest delays. So of course we needed to partner with the community health centers because they were in the community serving the populations. And so it was that partnership that early on in my career that just changed the trajectory of my research. And so not surprisingly, a major stakeholder partner for me and for our program is our Boston Health Net Community Health Centers. And so, you know, they know best what the community needs, yet they don't always have the resources to do research in their system. They want to do it, they're interested, they just don't have the capacity to do it. And so we partnered with them through the Boston Health Net Research Collaborative to set up some systems to help connect researchers and the health centers on research projects and support them with our services to make it easier to do the research in their practices. So that's one example. And then another infrastructure piece is, you heard from Margaret about her partnership grant. So we fund new community and research partnerships and support them through a longitudinal learning collaborative to help them identify a common agenda for research. And as we heard from Margaret, that process allowed her as a researcher to shape her research to be more community driven. And so those are just two examples.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Yorma just put in the chat the pilot program I just was referring to.
Yeah, it's a fantastic opportunity because it really provides, one of the issues is funding, and it really provides funding to intentionally take the time to build the relationship, build the partnership. And as Margaret indicated, through that process in her project, the community then determined the research questions and are now moving forward with their research agenda. In the interest of time, I'd like to open it up to the audience to see if you have questions for our panelists. Feel free to put them in the chat or, raise your hand. Although I don't know if I'll see, or just call out because I don't know if I can see everybody here. Any questions? Comments?
I have a question for Madison.
Sure.
Madison, can you talk more about your experience as a student with your colleagues around sort of community engagement and sort of how that comes into play in the rest of your curriculum? Because you mentioned that you were interested in this, but you didn't know where to go to get it. And the course that Dr. Sprague-Martinez developed is an amazing resource, but there's got to be other things that you've been exposed to as a student or that with your peers. I'm just wondering sort of what that community looks like for you as a student.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'm a macro major at BU, so we're exposed to things like this a little bit more. I see Margaret nodding her head. Yes, we're exposed to this a little bit more, and it's built into our curriculum. So, especially in our first year, we had to take a ton of community engagement and community-based classes. What it looks like to go into a community to support them in community organizing, how to set them up for sustainability. But what hadn't had the opportunity to do yet is putting that theory into actual practice and actual communities. And the class that I took ended up giving me the experience to do that. And one thing that I would love to see more of is more opportunities for that to happen. And I will say too, as a student in social work school, one of the things that myself and my peers are very mindful of is where the money is going and what is being funded, because it's making us try to prioritize. As much as we want to support the communities, we also need to support ourselves. And so it's making us focus on where we want to put our work and our research as we graduate. And one of the things that's been a big challenge is there seems to be a gap between who experts want to listen to and who we know is the expert of their own community. And one side has a long list of letters after their name and one side might not. And I am curious as a student entering the field of research, what tools we can utilize to close that gap. And so that's something that I would love to see as well.
I just put in the chat, like shared resources, like that's another paradigm shift. So that was really profound to sort of hear you say it like that and hear the impact it has on your career choice. And so, the impact that, the policies and the incentives have on career choices. Like if we don't get someone like you to stay in this game, we're not going to advance. And so how can we incentivize people to make those career choices so that they can, have appropriate compensation for the work? Well, thanks for that.
Yeah, that's a really important. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Madison.
Oh no, I was just going to say, Tracy, part of the thing that's incentivizing too for me as a student is being able to be part of things like this and seeing it done and seeing it done well. So being able to witness and hear about this being done makes me more likely to engage in this work and continue engaging in this work.
If I can jump in quickly, I just want to underscore the need for us to, as educators, as researchers, to model our commitment to community engaged research. I think that's going to be critical for the pipeline.
Thank you. Okay, I was in the interest of time, if you, from the audience, if you have any resources that you want to share, as part of this event, we wanted to sort of compile resources that would be helpful for you all. So if there are any resources that you can think of in your own campus or in the community, please put them in the chat so that we can compile those resources. There was a question in the chat about what sort of events are hosted by the CTSA in order for researchers to be aware of community engagement and research resources. Tracy or
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm looking at my colleague, Rebecca, so I'm going to put her on the spot a little bit. I mean, this event and this longitudinal series is one of those things. But I mean, the question brings up for me is, we're not doing enough because we're not reaching enough people. And so what is this community looking for, and how can we create the space for that? I think, you know, one really important thing is, I mean, there's a reason the name of this speaker series is creating a culture of community engagement, because we need to have a community of us that are coming together to do this work and to learn from one another. You know, there's a lot of other amazing resources through our CTSA program that are not necessarily community engaged resources, but, you know, we have, like I said earlier, we've infused community engagement across all of our work. And so because our CTSA is really focused on health equity, community engagement is at the core of that. So I don't know, Rebecca, are there other things that come to mind for you?
No, I agree with you, Tracy. I think we could do a much better job hosting events, even just small events. I think sometimes we get caught up in the event needs to be really large and it's too burdensome to plan. But I do think there's more opportunities for us to bring people together. I will say that we do our best to try to leverage existing communication channels, you know, impact reports and other forms of communication that highlight the work we do. But it's always a work in progress. And Gloria, as I mentioned, I was speaking with your colleague, Liz. Gloria and I have been chatting earlier today. I'd love to learn from other CTSA hubs about how they create space to share information that they have for researchers and community members. So please type information in the chat and we can use that as a way to start conversations.
Thank you, Tracy and Rebecca. I would just like to thank the panelists. I want to give a heartfelt thank you for sharing all of your insights and your experiences with us. You know, I want to highlight Margaret, who said, "You have to take your shoes off because I'm here to stay." And I really think that was really powerful. And that kind of sums up this session, which is that we need to be in the community, partnering with the community, sharing with the community. If you do have other ideas of resources or speakers that you would like to see, please feel free to reach out to myself or Yorma with those, because we're developing the speaker series for the year, but we'd love to hear from you if there are topics that you're interested in learning more about. I also want to draw your attention to our October speaker series event, where we will have Dr. Nina Wallerstein, Distinguished Professor and Director, Center for Participatory Research at the University of New Mexico. Nina Wallerstein is really an expert in this area of community-based participatory research, and we're really fortunate that she's taking her time to come and speak with us, and we hope that you can all join us for that session. So thank you all. We will stick around for a few minutes if you have any additional questions, but I want to be respectful of your time, so thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Great job, Estrella. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Estrella. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Madison.
Thank you, Tracy.
Nice to see you, Margaret.